We should be good now. Are we good now? It's not muted. It was just a setting issue. It's okay. I can read lips. Hello, you beautiful legends, guys. Good to have you here. We have a lot to cover, a lot of crazy stuff going on, a lot of important stuff, and I may surprise you today. Today may be somewhat different. Today I may have a potential bullish trade that I'm gonna discuss. Again, to each their own. This is not financial advice, as you guys all know. But I'm gonna show you something that, shout out to our beautiful member Damien. Damien noticed something. No, your mic went out of gas. So beautiful Damien here noticed something very interesting today, and we're gonna talk about it in about a second. Of course, the main culprit for the rally we're having today, if we're looking at the broader market, we're gonna see AMD is having a nice day in the sun, 8.7%, Intel 10.4, Avgo almost 8, MU 8. So we're seeing a lot of the tech sector and various tech-related assets basically are having a nice day in the sun. SanDisk here, 11.58. GLW having a very nice day in the sun as well. So basically a lot of nice assets today are, well, having a nice day, as you can see. But our main culprit is Palantir, 30% up. Now let's discuss this and see whether that was something that potentially people could have noticed in the first place, whether it was something missed. By the way, I will remind you, those who don't know, we actually mentioned this in our previous call about Palantir, which those who don't believe me, they can rewatch that episode of Palantir that we've covered a handful of months ago. And we said that potentially Palantir actually has somewhat of a build-up for a potential rally. The problem was, and is still, whether there will be enough time for that rally to actually play out before the market starts forcing the individual assets to have more pressure downwards, more bearish pressure. Now, where can we see that? You see, on the one hand, we're looking at this monthly, and it looks rather flat. Nothing all that exciting. Yes, there are some bullish impulses within the framework. Of course, naturally, now we see them. But if you pay close attention and you zoom into your daily, weekly, and even 4-hourly, you're going to notice something very interesting, especially during the 4 hours. What you're going to realize during that 4 hours, if you pay attention, right, you basically had all this volatility that appeared to be flat. But if you pay attention, it started generating, instead of lower lows, higher lows, right? We started generating higher lows, and generally speaking had, although kind of this flat, arguably the mixture of the two forces. But if you pay attention to your daily, what you're going to realize that what happened recently, all that buildup, that's the reason why you watch the various time frames, you're going to realize that the whole recent period, all of this basically was a form of a buildup. If you did not get the hint right here, you had a form of a buildup, right? Look at this. Your weekly will be probably the best hint towards that. But you see, the deeper you're gonna realize that the direction here started changing, right? And then the momentum started building up. Where do we see that build up? If you pay close attention, you're gonna realize this sideways movement that we just paid attention to in the smaller time frames, which does appear mostly sideways, is a form of a buildup. If you look at our stochastic RSI, you're going to realize that right here at the bottom, it basically bounced off of our 20 range, which was indicative of some form of a buildup, right? And some form of a correction. Now let's look at where actually did the price action explode. The price action exploded when we transferred, when we crossed over that 50 range while being actually bullish, implying a bullish correction. Unfortunately, those who don't realize and don't zoom out far enough, and that's part of the problem, I'm going to show exactly part of the problem, you're going to realize that this whole thing still has a downwards tendency. In other words, if you look carefully, you're going to realize the market, since I started saying it's going to have a significant down movement, we basically moved down 48.7%, give or take. This, although feels very bullish, is merely a correction. within a bullish trend. But we got to ask ourselves, we got to ask a very serious question, ladies and gents, because if as we normally say, how do we know truly that this weekly bullish momentum is ran its course and gonna basically collapse in the similar way that we saw here? How do we know that? Maybe it's still going to be bullish and continue shooting upwards. In fact, we have very clear divergence, right? So we may have more of that bullish momentum to be played out. Those who remember back in the day when I spoke about Palantir, I said Palantir will be dropping, but as if with a parachute. Basically, not bad as the rest of the market. Now, Greg, what do you mean the market is dropping? It's up today. Well, if you zoom out just a tiny little bit and realize the proportions, the relative proportions of these movements and scale of things, you're going to realize that, yeah, it's bullish, absolutely. For those of us who are bearish, it is absolutely unpleasant, and unpleasant each day, so to speak. Pay attention, by the way. I want you to notice that even though, notice this green-red channel, which is basically derived out of the data points that the price action itself is making. And so this gives us the median moving average process of what is actually going on. Of course, there will be slippages. The market basically will be shooting out or slipping out of the range sometimes. In this case, this data point, as extreme as it may be, it still did not force nor diverge the trend from becoming flat. Basically, it still is flat, which is quite indicative of that entire movement going backwards. Now, how does that whole thing correlate? First of all, we are seeing momentum starting to fade. Unsurprisingly so. When we say we have bullish momentum and it plays out, when it's purged, guess what? It is the same thing as shooting something up into the sky. Eventually, when the momentum runs out, gravity takes over and it starts accelerating back towards Earth. Same idea here. Unfortunately, first of all, I cannot tell you it's going to be a strict downwards movement right away. We're probably going to get entangled closing in that gap that was generated in that process. Sorry, I thought I saw something in the chat. So basically, we're expecting to see more of a drop right here, the 7629 area and 7610-ish, kinda. Still retesting those before we continue downwards. But is this the end all be all of all things? Unfortunately, no. Because if we look at our daily, what we're gonna realize that our daily is still somewhat bullish. Here it is, our daily is still bullish. And so, in other words, although we are right now actively testing median of our daily channel, which again is derived out of our data points, naturally that is the most accurate channel to look at, it is a bit problematic. So we are actually testing median, but still are bullish, and so can overshoot and entangle with it. That will still leads to higher price point. For example, 77, 764. Shout out to Polina that back in the day spoke about 7777, which still may play a role definitely under these conditions. Hate to admit it, but that looks to be the case. And in fact, on our weekly, although we are technically our momentum is more so bullish rather than bearish, we are on the bearish side of things, and so once that does not last too long, we're gonna see more bearish price action. Why do we anticipate that? Simply because if you've been paying attention to your monthly has switched over, and now, although very, very tight, very, very close, and it looks like a sort of close fight, I know, I get it, but still there is a bit of a margin starting to grow and a transition to the bearish direction. The more our bullish momentum over a longer period of time, that measurement via that the data points that we have shows us a bigger picture of what the momentum is actually doing. Even though on a shorter period it feels like we're bullish, but in reality, if you take and condense all that information and compare to longer periods, you realize we're not as bullish as we were during previous periods. And so basically we're losing slowly momentum, shifting over from what was bullish to neutral to then bearish. Of course, it takes time, especially when we're talking about the monthly scale, given that we just started the month 27 days ahead. But that also means this candlestick may look very, very differently than what it looks right now. By the time we end up locking it by the end of the month, that bearish momentum may start shifting inwards, and we're going to see at least some corrective measure. And in other words, we may see this candlestick that right now appears to be very bullish to end up actually either neutral or more so bearish and more indicative of a pull downwards rather than up. Why are we thinking that? As we said, our monthly just became bearish. Greg, how is that possible? Well, those who know technicals know that momentum, while it is still fading away temporarily, while it hasn't completely went or transferred to the point where there is no momentum left, you still can result in the price action wise with a higher price point, which we understand who was the culprit to push up the market mostly. Of course, subsequently we get this almost sector-wide movement, a lot of exuberance, a lot of excitement, and people start buying in, now realizing they're buying and basically burying themselves deeper, moving their averages higher first of all, and are basically buying off the market makers who are now aggressively selling before a corrective measure that we know that is coming, simply because the larger time frames have been indicative so for quite a long time. By the way, those who think that our quarterly is bullish now, no, you're wrong. With all this bullish momentum and price action, still objectively, although yes, the belly now have corrected and looks as if we're moving towards convergence, objectively hasn't had done that, even though we had all that bullish momentum. And arguably I would follow very, very closely that particular time frame, because it's very indicative where we're gonna end up in the longer run. Okay, even though it's taking longer, and I understand that. In fact, I can tell you that some of my members that understand these processes and methods and everything about technical analysis that there is to be known sort of and plays a major role and is important, also are starting to buckle and feel the pain and basically feel the pressure. I absolutely understand that. The reality is that nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is potentially that instead of this happening during already this month as we expected, potentially the whole process is going to get slightly elongated. Does that mean it's out of the realm of happening? Not at all. In fact, we're seeing more and more aggressive momentum on the bearish side of things slowly sipping into the system. In fact, those who didn't notice, let me show you something. And arguably, I do teach my students to pay close attention to this simply because this is a lot more indicative. Here, it's basically, as you can see, pretty much the very same similar structure as we have on the S&P. That is the NASDAQ, those who don't know. But here we have a bit of a different sort of opinion of matters, which, by the way, those who don't notice, we're basically still entangled with the top range of the main channel of our monthly right now. So it's not completely abnormal to see sort of that process until we completely break down. But if I'll show you the weekly, you're going to realize something very interesting that is not that visible on our SPX. We still are on a significant downtrend. This entire push up is merely a corrective measure. The same way we say when the market goes up too far, too fast, we correct to balance things out. The market does that in a very natural way because there is profit taking right here, and believe it or not, there is profit taking right here, vice versa. It's not all that different. On top of it all, there is cyclicality to be played out. Shout out to those who understand cyclicality and the waves and the way they should be structured within the framework, which, by the way, is tremendously important as well. Guess what plays a major role as well? If you don't know about the cycle, momentum, and framework, you're basically completely armless and legless in the stock market. In fact, you basically don't speak the market's language. What you're doing in it, I have no idea. Shout out to my community. I highly recommend you join and learn before it's too late. I know people will be swayed given what's going on right now in the stock market. They're like, Greg, you don't know anything. Look, the market is so bullish. No problem. Think that. I'm all fine with that. Just don't come running back to me within a couple of months or weeks whenever things will get very grim, which is exactly what we're anticipating and seeing in the broader market. And I know that looks bullish, but it's not. It's very misleading. I know. The problem is that even the few people that actually do know how to pay attention to the right things mostly pay attention to the S&P and are far too blinded by the temporary momentum that we're having right now within the system. Unfortunately, this does not change nor prevent the broader head and shoulders that I said we will have. All it does, it merely creates a volatile pocket within which we're probably going to end up correcting and still end up correcting downwards as anticipated because the broader cycle says so, not because of my thesis. I don't have a thesis. I'm merely an interpreter of what the market is saying. Don't believe me? Not a problem. I'm fine with that. The problem will become when even, by the way, to those who don't understand, the market generally works in these let's call them threes. So for example, just 1, 2, 3, basically this is a single impulse, which by the way had a back-end movement right here, a corrective movement that needs to technically, just needs to happen on the technical side of things. What you don't realize that we're basically moving into this trifecta again, and whether we're going to have another wave here that is going to be higher than the current point, still entangling with the current channels. You can see it's the very same channel basically. Even on the S&P we're testing the very same channel. You see it's the very same highs. It's just that this point ends up being slightly higher relative to the Nasdaq. Those who know how the two forces are related understand. Okay, and so basically this maybe there's another impulse right here happening, which we just spoke about it yesterday. We could be looking at the anticipation all the way into the midterms. The midterms could be a problematic zone, if you will, or rather before the midterms. They could drag things out until then and try and sell off as much as they can, which can result in slightly of a higher price. But what also that means, normally that final last push, that last leg, is used to have the market kind of have a soft landing of sort. Basically start moving with this tilt downwards before it really takes a downward sort of tendency or angle. Now the trick here is this: if this leg is used up to go higher, then there is no momentum left to go and have a soft landing. Then it just starts dropping like a rock off a cliff. And it doesn't matter whether it's going to take another month or a month and a half. To me, it doesn't. In fact, I'm going to try and build up my position downwards as strong as I can. But let's talk about upwards positions that, if we have all this period of time, are there other assets that could be potentially having the same build-up play out all along that we didn't notice and prepare for a strong push higher? Can we have other assets just like Palantir, in other words, that we missed out on? Ladies and gents, shout out to all of you who stayed all along until this point of the video. Love you all. And here I'm going to show you something that our beloved Damien from our community noticed and we just spoke about earlier. Damien, shout out to you, beautiful legend. Tesla, ladies and gents. Tesla, actually, if you pay close attention, first of all, we are right now hovering around 325. If you pay close attention to Tesla, first of all, it has been having a bit of a build-up, right? Which, as you can see, kind of the equal of what we had, a corrective measure of what we had on the left side. And we're actually, on our 4-hour at least, intertwined, bullish, bearish, a mixture, so kind of sideways into that support level, which is the 78.60 level, 326. We have, in fact, as you can see, a multitude of technical support levels here that matter quite a bit. We have 333 that was just above it and plays a major role. And we have our little downwards channel that we have been subject to some time for, but for some time now to this channel. But there's a bit of a problem. Palantir was subject to a very similar channel likewise and shot out. Even though if Palantir will suffer and will break back down the same way it climbed back up, sort of the same way this corrective measure, even though maybe there was a bit of a push still to be had, which it seems like we kind of squeezed the majority of that momentum and potentially going to be squeezing downwards sometime soon. Greg, why are you saying that? Because of your quarterly. It looks like shit, let's be honest, right? So our quarterly still looks like shit. Thank you, my brother from another mother. Absolutely, definitely another father. Much love to you, Damien, you beautiful legend. Now, so basically, if you pay close attention on the broad scheme of things, this sort of bullish movement is not all that, out of the realm of possibility, considering how channels work and ranges work within the spectrum of the stock market. And those who know, basically the same way we had this build up and then crossing into, you see, that bullish territory where we had a significant enough of a move, a trade potentially, right? Again, not financial advice, you do you, yeah. But again, are we seeing in other stocks something similar? Again, let's look here at Tesla. So 4 hours is kind of bullish, but that sort of signifies and translates into this move right here. What do we have on the daily? Oh, I almost ruined it. On the daily, in fact, we've been having a very similar build-up that we just seen on Palantir. We have a gap right above where we are at, which is a good excuse for the market to even shoot above that 333 range. If you pay attention to how our channel now got readjusted, and you realize we've been just as much subject of the current channel as we were of the smaller one recently, because the smaller one is merely the channel that pushed us downwards. But what about the larger channel we're within the framework of? And so if you pay close attention, you're going to realize we have this kind of a cell that has been created via the diagonal channels that we're moving within the framework of, and the support and resistance levels that naturally are created out of the system. We have our very strong psychological level of 420. Those who know. Of course, we have various technical levels like 414.50, 415.07, right around the very same area. The top of the red channels you can see right there, right next to it, kind of fits the purpose and the target. Basically, if we're going to be moving towards these wedges, you see these areas can be retested. Kind of, this is the mark I've been trying to point out towards. So if you pay close attention, what we may end up having, the very same argument. Guys, if the market does not collapse within the following sessions and has enough wind in its sails to stay afloat for the following sessions, our weekly may be affected by our daily and turn bullish. This bullish momentum may cross our 50 within no time, which may signify this potential move. Just saying. Again, to each their own. You measure yourself, and in fact, arguably, we may end up pushing higher above that range, because if we arrive at this range and we're still bullish, guess what? That probably means the convergence and the confluence of our channel, as you can see, the diagonal, meeting our psychological 444. So there's a confluence of forces here, that's why this area may end up being the actual resistance, while actually still retaining a lower low, right? And it can even cross through that range, completely cross through, as you can see right there, and still be bearish. So, arguably, Damien, shout out to you. You found this beautiful potential trade, which, again, this is not financial advice, to each their own, and that highly depends on the market allowing it, because imagine that the assets, the individual assets, the risk on assets are basically flowers in a garden. You don't need to poison the individual flower or, bush or whatever the hell it is. You can poison the overall ground, the soil. And if you poison the entire soil that everything else is growing on and in, guess what? It will all wilt and die. In other words, if the stock market starts dropping heavily and aggressively, this will simply will not come to fruition. But if the market is permissive, this may still well play out. And in fact, if we pay attention to our stock market right now, technically we're broader picture bearish, but we are purging some of our bullish momentum right now out of the system. And as we objectively see, and you guys know I always am objective, bullish on the weekly and bullish on the daily. So maybe that's that next push that's about to play out, ladies and gents. Just saying. And again, this is merely something that Damien noticed, analyzed with me. We've analyzed, we found maybe there is some interesting thing in that. So ladies and gents, there you go. There's a potential Tesla trade, but don't get carried away. Why? Because we're still saying the market on a broader scheme of things is bearish. Yes, may continue and push higher. Absolutely. Then we may be going to end up being convinced otherwise. But currently, momentum on a broader picture is not indicative of a push higher, but rather downwards. So be attentive to these things. Alrighty? Now, ladies and gentlemen in the crowd, go ahead, ask questions. If you have any comments and so on, of course, I would love your comments later down below in the video. Like, subscribe, and all that wonderful stuff. Join in the community right there. We have a link right there, up there. Patreon.com/Greg_Ori_H. you'll be met with our wonderful Discord community, and you can join the Technical University if you feel like joining it, because in it has a lot more information and far more in-depth technical analysis skills and knowledge and know-how, which I highly recommend everyone having, because like I said earlier, if you don't know these things, you're basically not talking the market language. And don't be surprised if things such as this will happen, will catch you off guard. You're going to be completely caught off guard, surprised, like, why the market behaving so bullishly when we were so bearish? You're being thrown left and right, basically, all ratchet, no vomit. You're being thrown to the left of the ship, to the right of the ship, and you don't know what the market is actually doing. So, to know what the market is actually doing, to understand harmonic patterns, to understand cyclicality, to understand momentum, to understand structures and everything that is happening in the market that drives it, and why actually we're going to end up moving, for example, with NASDAQ, it's probably closer to 20,000, which is a drop of almost 10K, really $9,000, give or take. You definitely want to join the community and learn all these skills so you'll know exactly how to navigate this very, very, very difficult market that's going to play out. Again, regarding Tesla Palantir, before that, by the way, shout out to our Paulina here, because Paulina is the one that initially said that Trump may end up trying to drag the markets out until the midterms, and I was saying that I don't think the markets will be able to endure that long before they crack and collapse. And Paulina anticipated that, given her own technical analysis that she learned from me in our community, in the Technical Analysis University, which you want to join, like I said, she was able to derive a bit of a different analysis than I have and expect a more prolonged bullish process as we're having right now, rather than myself. On the broader scheme of things, Paulina and I are in a grand sort of generally in agreement. So it seems, at least for now, that the market is gonna come to fruition, and this broader major correction is gonna lead very low. But right now, we're definitely sort of seeing Paulina's thesis playing out far closer than mine. So shout out to her. I feel very proud because she was able to analyze that given what I taught her. So, yeah, that is pretty much it, ladies and gents. And let's now tackle the question that Paulina had. Of course, my camera dies at the most hilarious moment. Let's see if I can bring it back online real quick. I gotta solve this camera problem. Well, I solved it partially. It still is being annoying from time to time, as you guys can see. No, it's not overheating issue. So regarding Tesla and Palantir, monthly momentum is very different. Tesla is bearish now. Well, that's a wonderful question, Paulina. Let's look at how our monthly momentum looks like, and that's a very good point. But you realize that, again, we can have a very swift bullish run right here without affecting, the same way we are now having on S&P, a very strong, swift, bullish wave or impulse, to be more precise about things. And it simply does not affect the moving average of our momentum or even ranges on our channels on the broader scheme of things, meaning we can have a rapid movement that will cancel itself out very rapidly without affecting the broader picture scheme of things, and especially the divergence that we are seeing right here, which is very indicative of how strong the potential downtrend will be, which on the grand scheme of things, we are still on the same page, Paulina. It still is. That's exactly what I'm saying. It's merely trading into... This is like the last thing I recommend. You know that. Basically, we're on a downtrend, and this is trading into a corrective measure. But unfortunately, given the current conditions and what we're seeing in the market, that would be dumb of me not to highlight that. Again, also, one of our members noticed it. I tend to agree with what I'm saying. I have given all the warnings and explained that you should not do this unless you understand the various technical elements and facets that you should be attentive to while the process is playing out, because if it changes on a dime, you need to be able to identify and react to it. So very, very important, Paulina. You're very correct. On a grand scheme of things, yes, Tesla is tremendously bearish, but unfortunately right now, similar to what we've seen, this temporary delay, we may end up seeing on this good news, good vibes, good whatever sort of bullshit good feeling of some investor or whatever, or market makers that are trying to manipulate the broader market, just saying, we may end up seeing this movement in which, as we call it in Hebrew, aramal anchata. That is when a soccer player sort of makes this perfect pass, so another perfect player can make a goal. But the trick here is that the market makers, the very same institutions that capitalize on this, they're the ones who make the initial move to push the markets higher, so their current stock will be sold at a higher point, and their current stock that they just now purchased into their already existing moving into their average, believe it or not, is also being sold at a higher price point, and so there is profits for that as well. So don't worry for their ROI. They know what they're doing, but they are basically creating a perfect pass for themselves. And before that happens, when no one anticipates that, you should probably, know that there are signs for it. Does it have to happen? No, guys, I'm not telling you to trade that upwards. There is a gap to be filled, first of all, remember, which, by the way, another reason why we're already probably predicting Palantir to have a significant corrective measure, because if you pay close attention, and I'm going to show you all, those who know, of course, most of this movement, most of this rally, basically, we started right here. You see these sort of empty territories, empty zones. In fact, let me make it a solid color so you can see, kinda. No, that's not perfect. But okay, so you see where you have these very deep gray colors? This is the actual session. This is post-market, where we have this dark blue post-market. This is overnight, and pre-market yellow, sunshine, yeah? So what you can tell from this, that the entire movement actually occurred. We were here before the market started moving, 123, wink, wink, those who know. And we started moving all the way from there. We shot up throughout the post-market, overnight, and pre-market. So this entire thing, although you'll see actually it ends here, it was made inside of a gap. If you pay close attention, you're going to realize that this entire thing, just as I showed you, this entire thing, basically, there is a gap yay big, you see? Because this entire thing happened in pre and post and pre-market and overnight. So there's a gap to be had here. In other words, let me show you this chart. Instead of including extended or 24 hours, regular trading hours, you're going to realize that there is a significant major gap here to be filled. The very same way we have the opposite of that on Tsla. So there are reasons to think why there is a probability to see that closure of that gap, as you see, as we just highlighted, right? Now, does it have to go all the way to? No, but that is the beauty of knowing technical analysis and being able to follow through as the process is happening and seeing whether you still have fuel in the system or gasoline to continue higher. So that is the benefit of technical analysis skills. And even though, exactly as we just said, this is technically a downtrend, but we just saw Palantir shot out, and technically that can happen as long as it does end up correcting back into the channel. None of it matters. If you were asleep for these couple of days, you may as well pretend it didn't happen. As long as you don't execute here, you do not benefit. You're just a moron, and now you're deeper in the doo-doo. So you see, again, if you know how to run this, please go ahead, feel free, up to you. I'm not your, I'm not your account manager, nor am I your financial advisor. I am merely a guy on the internet who knows how to analyze the markets because he worked in the industry for many years. And you do you. This is not financial advice. Ta-da! Now, remember SpaceX earnings today, and Tesla will be affected. There you go, Zach. Absolutely good, wonderful point. You can absolutely have SpaceX be an effect on Tesla. Ta-da. There are, guys, the market, all of this junk, this shit, pardon the French, is noise. You see this? This is daily noise. This is weekly noise. This is where the market is actually headed. You see this? You see this channel? This is where the market is actually headed. And it's not lying to you. It is actually telling you the truth. If you want to ignore it, ignore it. The problem is, it is still a range, and the market still can slip out, and sometimes aggressively, given conditions. And yes, as long as momentum does give you the idea that it can perform that, then why not? If it prevents you from thinking that, don't try to be against the tsunami. I don't know, kind of makes sense. Just saying. Now, Again, this is just my own. Oh shit, my camera is still off. I still look like, oh, god damn it. But yeah, you guys get the idea, basically. Camera, come on, start cooperating. Why is my camera not all working? Damn it. Give me more. Huh? Work. Work. Yes, there you go. It's work. So, now, back to our chat, ladies and gents. Any questions? Any final questions before we go on? I have a funny face there. As long as you guys hear me, that's what's important. I don't give a shit about the camera, really. I just do that because people say it's important. Mix gives a nice feeling or whatever the hell. Next time I'm gonna wear a tinfoil hat helmet so everybody feels good about my analysis. Any questions, ladies and gents? No? Anything? Last final comments? You can give your thoughts as well. Would appreciate that. If there aren't any, I guess we're going to be done. No questions. All right. No questions, no comments, no nothing. Ladies and gents, I love you all. That was a good video. Good breakdown of what I wanted to tell you. I got to run because in about 30 minutes I have an academy meeting with my members. Yeah, and so I wish you a wonderful week, and I hope you guys are gonna stay sane and stable in this very volatile and crazy times and market. Love you all. Bye-bye. Would you recommend to wait for SpaceX earnings before getting in? Naturally, you would want to see a sign, but the problem is if you're waiting for the last moment and when the market will explode overnight, only the market makers will benefit from it. Again, you do you do what you think is right. But objectively looking at this channel, we definitely have made all our way, we are way all the way from the top, as we tend to do, back to the bottom, and we're maybe building up. The problem is we don't know whether we're actually going to make it all the way to the other top, simply because the market is signaling a major correction. See you soon. Cool beans, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, dear. Yeah, that's it. Alrighty, ladies and gents, I'll see you on the next one. Love you all.